Hello, incredible story enthusiasts. Welcome to Story Room Lab. Before we delve into the story, take a second to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss one of our dramatic episodes. Now, tell me in the comments below. Where are you watching this story unfold from? I love seeing our community grow across the globe. Now let's delve into the story. The realization didn't come with a crash of thunder or a dramatic discovery. It arrived like a tiny, almost imperceptible glitch in a perfectly running algorithm. My life with Julian had been meticulously coded for 15 years. Our schedules were synchronized, our finances optimized, and our emotional exchanges were predictable and comfortable, like a well-worn cashmere sweater. I knew the weight of his briefcase, the pattern of his footsteps on the hardwood, the precise inflection of his voice when he claimed to be stuck in a meeting. It was the very predictability of our existence that allowed me to notice the anomalies, the tiny specks of dust that suggested a disruption in the system. The first hint was the car mileage. Julian drove a black sedan, reliable and unremarkable, leased through his firm. He traveled weekly from our suburban home into the city, a 45-mile commute each way. I kept a running log of his quarterly maintenance, a habit born of an engineer's need for data, not suspicion. One month, the reported mileage was 300 miles over the average, yet his travel reports, which I casually reviewed as part of managing our joint tax portfolio, showed no unexpected business trips. When I asked, he offered a vague explanation about a new, temporary client in a different wing of the city, a detour that supposedly added an extra 10 miles daily. I accepted the explanation, filed it away as plausible, and moved on. But the data point remained, an outlier waiting for company. Company arrived a week later in the form of a scent. It wasn't perfume. Julian and I favored neutral, hypoallergenic cleansers. This was something earthy, slightly sweet, like expensive sandalwood and sun-dried linens, a domestic scent, not a professional one. It clung faintly to the collar of a crisp white shirt I was pressing before our cleaner arrived. It was the scent of someone else's home, someone else's fabric softener, someone else's life. I didn't confront him. Confrontation, I realized, was an emotional act. My response had to be clinical. I took the shirt, placed it in a labeled plastic bag, and sealed it. Evidence A. Olfactory anomaly. The final piece of the initial puzzle, the piece that triggered the full system investigation, was the credit card statement. Julian and I had separate personal cards, used for discretionary spending, but all linked to our joint account for automated payment. Scrolling through the monthly ledger, a pattern emerged. 3 recurring charges. 2 were small. A $25 monthly donation to a local community arts center I'd never heard of, and a $15.99 monthly subscription for a gourmet coffee delivery service we didn't use. The third was larger and more concerning, a $125 weekly charge, recurring every Thursday, labeled simply as Wellness Center. He worked late on Thursdays. The charge had been occurring for 10 months. I retreated to my home office, a space defined by glass walls and quiet, where I built complex financial models for a living. I closed the door and opened a fresh, encrypted spreadsheet titled Project Phoenix. My hands were steady. My heart rate remained steady at 62 beats per minute, monitored by my fitness watch. There was no anger, no panic, just the cold, detached engagement of a problem solver faced with a complex, multivariable equation. The Julian I knew, the husband who kissed me goodbye every morning, was a construct. He was the front-end interface. I was about to dive into the back-end code to find the hidden database. I started by cross-referencing the 3 anomalies. The gourmet coffee subscription was delivered to a P.O. box in a quiet, upscale neighborhood 10 miles from his supposed new client. The community art center was 2 blocks from that P.O. box. The wellness center charged on Thursdays was a small, high-end spa, easily searchable online, situated exactly between the other 2 locations. Julian was not working late on Thursdays. He was operating his second life within a neat, triangular perimeter. He hadn't been sloppy, but he had been predictable. He had used the same organizational logic he applied to his work. Efficiency, proximity, and a plausible cover story for the time spent away. The only thing he hadn't accounted for was my capacity for quiet, meticulous analysis. The game had just begun, and the rules of engagement were simple. He didn't know he was playing, and I wouldn't lose. The next step required access. I needed the hidden phone, the digital hub of his shadow existence. I knew exactly where to look. He always hid his most precious secrets in plain sight, protected by the assumption of my inattentiveness. The hunt for the hidden phone was almost disappointingly straightforward. Julian's genius, if one could call it that, lay in complex tax shelters, not concealment. He followed a rule I had taught him years ago. Hide things where they belong, but in a place no one looks. For him, that place was inside a thick leather-bound volume on the highest least-used shelf of our study library. A first-edition copy of The Art of War, a book he ironically revered but had never actually read. The central pages had been expertly cut out to form a small, velvety compartment. The phone was an inexpensive burner, a Samsung, not the high-end Apple he carried daily. It was the color of dull pewter, heavy with secrets. I didn't hesitate. I used a thin layer of laboratory paste I kept for repairing ceramics to lift the print from the screen and replicate the swipe pattern on a piece of mylar. Within minutes, I had access. There was no password lock on the apps. The concealment was physical, not digital. This confirmed my theory. He underestimated my curiosity and overestimated my emotionality. He assumed I'd never look, never touch the dusty, symbolic book. The contents were a complete, detailed cartography of his duplicity. His second life wasn't a spontaneous fling. It was a parallel domesticity. There was a woman, a graphic designer named Eliza, who lived in the small condo near the wellness center. Her photos filled the gallery, sun-drenched picnics, cozy nights in, even a framed photo of them, clearly taken by a professional, standing outside a lighthouse on a rocky coast. He had not just stolen time. He had stolen memories. More critically, the phone contained the transactional data that substantiated my legal strategy. He had been paying the rent for Eliza's condo through a separate LLC account, a shell corporation he used for high-risk investments, keeping the transactions off our primary ledger. The condo was beautiful. I cross-referenced the address and found the property listing. He hadn't bought it, but he had leased it in his own name, hiding the paper trail only superficially. The texts revealed an intimate, caring relationship, discussing her ailing mother, his career frustrations, and their shared plan to adopt a rescue dog in the spring. The emotional void I should have felt was replaced by a clinical, focused energy. I spent the next 3 days quietly mapping this new landscape. I drove the 45 miles, locating the condo, the art center, the spa, and the P.O. box. I noted the timings. Julian spent Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., and all day Saturday, in his second life. This accounted perfectly for the mileage and the late meetings. While he was constructing a false future with Eliza, I was constructing the legally unassailable foundation for his past. I photographed everything. The phone's contents, the lease agreement copy stored in his cloud, and the photos of him with Eliza. I transferred all data to a dedicated, encrypted external drive. I didn't contact a lawyer yet. My first goal was to secure my financial position, which required a level of documentation that only I could obtain before the storm broke. I pulled 10 years of our joint tax returns, detailed logs of all his investments, including the Shell LLC, and the complete, current portfolio allocations. Everything was meticulously organized, labeled, and time-stamped. I looked at the pictures of Eliza. She was lovely, younger, and radiant. She wasn't a stereotypical mistress. She looked like a genuine partner, someone he might have built a real life with if he hadn't already been married to me. The realization that he hadn't sought a fling, but a replacement life, a softer, more creative, more emotionally engaged version of the life he had with me, did not hurt. It merely added another variable to the equation. Variable E, the replacement factor. It wasn't about love or sex. It was about escaping the meticulously structured life I had engineered, which, ironically, he benefited from every single day. This discovery solidified my resolve. This ending had to be surgical, clean, and entirely non-emotional. I had to terminate the failing project with zero emotional debt. The planning phase was ready to begin. My planning was not an exercise in vengeance but in optimization. I viewed the marriage as a complex joint venture corporation that had been compromised by a rogue executive. The objective was liquidation, maximizing my stake while minimizing collateral damage and ensuring a swift, decisive break. The quietly, without tears, mandate was my personal constraint, and to achieve it, every step had to be procedural. The first move was securing a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in high-net-worth, low-conflict divorce, a professional who viewed domestic dissolution with the same detached pragmatism I did. I chose Anya Kovar, recommended by a colleague for her ice-cold negotiation skills and total commitment to client confidentiality. Our initial meeting, conducted during a scheduled client lunch I took in the city, lasted 4 hours. I didn't weep, lament, or express shock. I presented her with the Project Phoenix file, 15 years of financial documentation, the detailed evidence of the Shell LLC, the lease agreement for Eliza's condo, and the photographic evidence of Julian's double life. Anya reviewed the file, her expression never changing. "You have documented this as if you were preparing for a hostile corporate takeover, not a divorce," she noted, looking impressed. "Your evidence of dissipation of marital assets through the LLC is irrefutable. We can ensure you retain the maximum possible equity in the marital home, a majority of the retirement savings, and an advantageous split of the investment portfolios. We don't need messy litigation. We have leverage." My response was brief. "I don't want the house. I want a clean break and liquid assets. Sell the house, split the profit 60-40 in my favor, and I keep my primary investment account separate. The priority is speed and silence. I want this done before Eliza's hypothetical rescue dog arrives." This request, to walk away from the primary asset, surprised Anya, but she immediately grasped the strategy. I didn't want the emotional weight of the past. I wanted freedom, mobility, and the capital to start fresh. We drafted a separation agreement that was financially fair but psychologically devastatingly effective. It itemized Julian's undisclosed expenditures, listed the Shell LLC by name, and included a non-disparagement clause that barred him from discussing the terms of the settlement or the affair with any external party. This wasn't about punishing him. It was about controlling the narrative and guaranteeing my peace. The logistical plan was just as detailed. I spent the next 4 weeks quietly disentangling my personal life. I opened a new, personal bank account at a different institution and systematically transferred all my direct deposits. I changed the locks on my home office and secured my personal valuables. I even packed my clothing, not into moving boxes, but into new expensive travel trunks I had delivered to a storage unit downtown. I moved my life out of the shared space with the precision of a safecracker, removing all trace of my preparation. The final element of the blueprint was the location of the severance. I wouldn't do it at home. I refused to let his inevitable emotional outburst contaminate my sanctuary. I chose the conference room at Anya's law firm, a neutral, clinical setting, on a Friday afternoon when Julian thought he was walking into a routine meeting with our wealth management advisor. I would be there, flanked by my legal counsel, and the paperwork would speak for itself. The entire process was designed to eliminate any opportunity for pleading, negotiation, or tears, his or mine. Every potential variable had been accounted for, every emotional escape route blocked. I was no longer a wife. I was a project manager, and this was the final deployment. The only thing left was to execute the termination sequence. The moment arrived on a cold, bright Friday. I was already at Anya Kovar's office, seated at the polished mahogany table in the conference room. I was wearing a charcoal suit, not the stylish designer clothes Julian admired, but a functional, unadorned suit I wore when negotiating big contracts. I felt nothing but a deep, humming quietness, the calm before a system reboot. Julian arrived precisely on time, looking slightly stressed but composed. He greeted me with a peck on the cheek, a gesture so familiar it felt like a foreign language. "Ready to talk stocks, darling?" he asked, adjusting his tie. He glanced around the room, noting Anya, who was sitting silently with a thick file in front of her. His smile faltered. "Anya? I thought we were meeting with... Wait, where's Mark?" I spoke for the first time, my voice level, stripped of all warmth. "Mark is not here, Julian. This is a meeting regarding the dissolution of our marriage." The blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly white. His hand instinctively went to his wedding band. He looked at me, searching for the crack, the tears, the fury he must have rehearsed for months in his head. He found only emptiness. What? What are you talking about? What is this? Is this some kind of joke?" Anya calmly slid the Project Phoenix file across the table. It was a neat, professional binder, labeled with only the firm's logo. "Mr. Thorne, your wife is petitioning for a no-fault divorce based on irreconcilable differences. However, due to the evidence of marital asset dissipation, this proposal includes a leveraged settlement that provides Mrs. Thorne with an equitable distribution, far exceeding the standard 50-50th split." Julian didn't look at the document. He looked at me. Leveraged? Assets? What evidence? What are you doing, Clara? You can't just. I cut him off, not sharply, but factually. The burner phone. Julian. The lease for the condo on Cedar Street. The Shell LLC you used to pay the rent. The 3 recurring charges. The coffee, the art center, the spa. The 300 excess miles on the odometer. I know. Julian. I know about Eliza. I know your entire schedule. I've known for 2 months. The shock that hit him was immediate and total. It was the shock of a masterful chess player realizing he's been checkmated by a move he never even considered. He leaned back in his chair, his breath catching. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't even mention Eliza's name. His realization was purely intellectual. I had known everything, and I had done nothing. Why didn't you say anything? His voice was a raw whisper, filled with confusion, not remorse. Because the goal was a clean exit, not a dramatic scene, I explained, gesturing toward the binder. The paperwork is finalized. The separation agreement is fair, accounting for all your secret expenditures. We sell the house. I keep my accounts. You keep yours. The only thing I require is your signature today, acknowledging the terms and waiving your right to contest the financial arrangement. We bypass the courts, we avoid public record, and we maintain professional dignity. It ends today, Julian, quietly. He stared at the binder, then back at my face, which remained a mirror of cool resolution. He saw no hysteria, no pain, no betrayal. Just the execution of a final contract. He searched my eyes for the ghost of the woman he had married, the one who would have screamed and cried, but she was gone, replaced by the detached architect of Project Phoenix. He spent the next hour with Anya, his face buried in the documents, his silence confirming every word I had spoken. He fought for an extra 5%, debated the valuation of a small, obscure bond, and finally, exhausted and defeated, he signed. He signed the dissolution of our life together with the same pen he used to sign our mortgage 15 years ago. When he pushed the papers back, he looked utterly broken, but not by heartache, by the chilling realization of his own foolish predictability. I stood up. Good luck, Julian. He didn't reply. He only watched as I walked out of the conference room and out of the building. The city air felt clean and sharp. I had closed the book, terminated the project, and I had done it without a single tear, without a raised voice, and without once looking back. 2 months later, the system was fully purged. The marital home was sold, the equity wired to my new, separate accounts. The financial separation was complete, final, and irreversible. I was in a small, beautifully minimalist apartment downtown. A place with large windows overlooking the city skyline, a perfect, unburdened space. There were no shared memories here, no ghost of Julian's footsteps, no hint of sandalwood and sun-dried linens. My life was now defined by a radical and exhilarating simplicity. I had resigned from my old, high-pressure job and started a consulting firm, focusing on risk mitigation and financial structuring. The skills I used to map Julian's deception had become my new professional foundation. My clients respected my detached, data-driven approach. They didn't know I had perfected it in my own living room. People often ask me how I was coping. "You're so calm," they'd say, expecting the brittle surface of repressed grief. "How did you manage it?" My answer was always the same, delivered with genuine clarity. It wasn't a loss, it was a necessary reorganization. The truth was, the marriage had died long before Julian started his second life. It had died when our love transitioned from a vibrant, shared journey into a highly efficient, mutually beneficial enterprise. We were business partners sharing a residence, optimizing a portfolio, and running a household that performed flawlessly on paper. Julian built his second life because the first one had become functionally sterile. My reaction wasn't pain because there was no love left to betray. There was only a partnership agreement that had been breached. My mission was simply to enforce the terms and exit with my reputation and assets intact. The true test of my no second thoughts rule came when I saw him. It was a drizzly Tuesday morning, and I was stepping out of a cafe near my new office. Julian was walking out of a stationery store a block away, holding a large, flat package, likely something Eliza needed for a presentation. He saw me and he froze. His eyes held a flicker of the old shame and a persistent baffled resentment at my calm. He looked thinner, slightly unkempt, the polished sheen of the successful executive slightly tarnished. He still wore his daily wedding ring, a redundant gesture that spoke volumes about his inability to move on cleanly. I nodded, a brief, professional acknowledgement, the kind I'd give a former colleague I hadn't worked with in years. I didn't slow down. I didn't smile. I offered nothing. I had no curiosity about his new life, no residual anger, and zero desire for reconciliation or closure. The closure had been the signature on the document. As I walked away, I felt a wave of profound relief wash over me. It was the peace that comes from knowing you executed a difficult task perfectly, overcoming an immense obstacle through intellect and discipline. I had refused to participate in the melodrama of betrayal. I had refused to grant him the power of my tears. I had taken the chaos he created and converted it into order, into freedom, into capital. Julian had tried to escape his life by building a shadow reality. I had escaped our life by dismantling the whole structure and walking away into the light. I had traded a compromised, inauthentic future for an uncharted, uncoded one, and I had done it all quietly, without tears or second thoughts. My future, finally, belonged only to me. The final step in Project Phoenix wasn't legal or financial. It was existential. It occurred a year after the divorce was finalized, when I received a letter from Anya Kovar's office. It was a brief, courteous note informing me that Julian Thorne and Eliza May had married in a small ceremony in the Bahamas. Attached was a copy of a short local newspaper announcement. I read the clipping over my morning espresso. It registered like a weather report, predictable, expected, and entirely irrelevant to my day. I felt a faint, almost academic interest, realizing that I hadn't been an obstruction to be overcome. I had been a catalyst. By quietly dissolving our marriage, I had, paradoxically, cleared the path for Julian to pursue the very life he had been building in secret. I was the one who enforced his dreams. But I was no longer invested in his narrative. My existence was a symphony of self-determination. I spent my weekends traveling, not on romantic escapes, but on solo adventures that challenged my intellect and physical stamina. Hiking the Chilean Andes, studying renewable energy policy in Norway. I was building a world based on my own design principles. Honesty, efficiency, and zero tolerance for structural weakness. The most significant change was the absence of the we. The constant, subtle mental coding of every decision in terms of our budget, our schedule, our collective image, was gone. It was replaced by a singular, focused I. I didn't need to account for excess mileage, sanitize my emotions, or hide my analytical nature. I was simply Clara, the architect of my own destiny. One evening, I found the sealed plastic bag containing the white shirt with the sandalwood scent, evidence A, at the bottom of a box of old administrative records. I paused, holding the stiff fabric in my hands. The scent was long gone, but the memory of the moment of discovery remained. It wasn't a memory of pain, but of a quiet, internal starting gun. I didn't burn it, or shred it, or bury it in a dramatic ritual. I simply placed the shirt, still folded, into the recycling bin. It was a piece of trash, a broken remnant of a failed system, and it deserved no more attention than any other discarded document. That was the true end. Not the signatures, not the sale of the house, but the utterly mundane, emotionless disposal of the last piece of tangible evidence. There were no ghosts in my new apartment, only the clarity of the city lights and the absolute certainty that the past had been resolved, without tears, without regret, and without a single second thought. The future was mine, and it was perfectly, peacefully quiet.